Everybody. My name is Mark Pinaud. I'm a senior manager of product here on the DynamoDB team. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what's new in DynamoDB, some of our recent launches, and giving a bit of a sneak preview into a new launch that we have coming out. I've been with AWS for about 6 years. For the first 4, I was within the application integration organization, working on Amazon SNS, our simple notification service. And for the last 2, I've been on the DynamoDB team. I figured before jumping into our recent launches, I'd cover off a little bit about what hasn't changed in DynamoDB. And I would say these 4 things kind of comprise the foundation of Dynamo. So, consistent performance at any scale. So whenever, regardless of whether your application is serving 100 or 100 million users, you still have access to the same consistent single-digit millisecond latency regardless. We're serverless, so you could pay per request. There are no instances, no versions, no maintenance windows to manage. So it's, operationally quite simple. Where we offer a global multi-active replication with global tables. And that supports both strong and eventual consistency mode for your reads, depending on the data freshness that you require in a given region. And we're secure and resilient. So, we offer, a variety of ways of taking backups, point-in-time recovery. We have encryption everywhere, that sort of thing. In terms of scale, we've got hundreds of tables over 200 terabytes, hundreds of tables that are taking over 1 billion requests per hour, and hundreds of tables that are receiving over 500,000 requests per second. And when we look at Amazon Prime Day in 2025, we had tens of trillions of requests that day. Set a new record of 151 million peak RPS, so requests per second, and our response times were consistently below 10 milliseconds. And, in essence, this is why, we still have over 1 million customers that trust DynamoDB for their critical workloads. And that, of course, includes, the Amazon.com storefront. In terms of the DynamoDB innovation over time, I won't cover all of these here, but, we've maintained consistent velocity, whether it's, the launch itself of Dynamo in 2012, DynamoDB streams, global tables, on-demand mode, multi-region strong consistency, configurable point-in-time recovery windows. We've maintained consistent feature velocity throughout the years, and we intend to continue to do that. And when we think about how to, focus our efforts in given areas, I think from a product standpoint, fundamentals always comes first. So those things that we talked about at the beginning, and certainly the performance, single-digit millisecond at any scale. We want to keep investing in global tables. These sorts of things. Obviously, security is a P0. But essentially, when we think about it, fundamentals comes first. Then we think through ease of use, and we want to keep adding features in that area, and then we want to extend the use cases that we can support as well. So that's kind of the main 3 buckets that we think about. And in terms of feature sets and areas that we're kind of thinking about, it's obviously global tables, different types of integrations like we have for Zero-ETL. The overall developer experience, improving performance, improving the manageability of our service and our assets, and then, of course, security. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our recent launches. And like I said, they're kind of classed, grouped similarly, to what I just showed. But, across the serverless portfolio, we recently launched, warm throughput. And warm throughput essentially allows you to pre-warm a table so that regardless of a burst of traffic that you might have during a sale or, a high traffic event, your table is pre-warmed so that it can instantly accommodate that throughput. Another key launch, actually, this is just about kind of the 12-month anniversary, but we launched we delivered an on-demand price reduction of up to 50%, last year. So hopefully that encourages folks to consider on demand for their workloads. because it does make the price to performance ratio much more amenable for on-demand mode. When it comes to global tables, we support all regions. And same with the on-demand price reduction. Last year, we launched a price reduction of up to 67% for global tables. So we reduced the replication cost when replicating to your global tables. We also launched strong consistency, the preview last year at reInvent. So RPO of 0. We just finished that up and it's now generally available. From a manageability and observability standpoint, we've had a number of launches recently. So, the first one there is configurable point-in-time recovery. And, with point-in-time recovery, essentially within the last 35 days, you could decide, a given point where you want to recover to. What we learned from customers is that for compliance reasons, you might not actually want to have the full 35 days. So we made it so that you can select a shorter window boundary to meet your compliance requirements. From an observability standpoint, we also launched latency percentile statistics. So you can get the server-side latency with a custom percentile for your tables. So, you can manage that through CloudWatch, but essentially if you want to go and look at the 4.9 latency or the 3.9 latency of a given table, you're going to be able to go and select that. We also launched Granular throttling exceptions recently. So what that basically does is it makes sure that it's more clear when you receive a throttle, if it's related to the amount you have provisioned on your table, or if you have a hotkey or something of that nature. We're just more clear in the exception that we respond with, so that you can react accordingly within your applications. And then last but not least, within manageability and observability, we launched a new CloudWatch Contributor Insights throttle-only mode. So previously, if you wanted to use CloudWatch Contributor Insights to have an understanding of your most accessed keys, or which keys are most throttled, you had to basically accept that all requests, even your successful ones, were going to be essentially metered or emitted to CloudWatch. With throttle-only mode now, you can actually optionally only send the throttle events. So what that means is that for your highest volume tables, you no longer need to send all of the events. You could just send the ones that are throttled, and that can significantly reduce the amount you spend for your observability need in this area. So that kind of encapsulates some of the things that we've launched for serverless global tables and the manageability and observability space. From a security standpoint, we launched attribute-based access control last year. And, some of our more recent launches include private link for streams and DAX, streams and AWS private link FIPS endpoints. I think that was just a few weeks ago. And, the same goes for IPv6. So we now support IPv6 as well. In terms of integrations, we launched the Zero-ETL integration with Amazon SageMaker Lakehouse last year. But I wanted to include all of the Zero-ETL integrations here just to make sure that we covered them off, because there's a lot of good integrations. If you want to move data around or you have different needs for your data, you could use those things to shift your data around essentially. And we've had a variety of launches from a generative AI standpoint. So within the last few months, essentially, we've launched 5 new things. The first being the DynamoDB MCP server. We followed that up with a data modeling MCP tool. So obviously within the MCP server, you have access to our APIs and things of that nature. But we also have kind of engineered context whereby, you can work with, an AI agent of your choice and essentially get help with, data modeling. So that's really, really cool. Another launch that we have is the database Analyzer MCP tool. So, if you're contemplating shifting, one of your relational workloads over to Dynamo to take advantage of its consistent performance, this will kind of analyze your access patterns so that you can, determine what what that data model might look like in a NoSQL world. Another launch that we have is the data model validation MCP tool. So what this will do is it basically will take your the data model that our MCP tool has created for the data model or any data model, and just to analyze whether or not it's a valid one. So it's just validating, reconfirming that the data model that we've produced is a valid one, and it takes a look at that sort of thing. And then lastly, we launched very recently a DynamoDB LangGraph connector. So you're able to basically use DynamoDB as a database for when you're creating AI agents with LangGraph. And I would say, I would expect that more and more things are going to be coming in the generative AI space for us. And we want to make sure that, our focus point here is making sure that, customers can take advantage of all the features that DynamoDB has. And if there are specific workloads that, are in the relational world that might be right for, coming to DynamoDB, we want to make sure that, there's tools that you can use to simplify that kind of, migration. So in terms of what's next for DynamoDB, I have kind of one specific area that I want to talk about for a launch that's coming up. And the new launch is around enhancing query flexibility for GSIs. And essentially, I'll walk through like a very high level, a very simple example. But in this example, we have a table, there's a partition key, there's an order ID, and then there's a handful of attributes. But essentially, for the longest time, DynamoDB's been, very, very good at being a simple key value store. And, over the years, customers have, wanted to expand the way that they can look up their data in DynamoDB, and they found creative ways to do that with GSIs, and that's why GSIs exist, global secondary indexes. It's to, offer more flexible ways of querying your data. For hierarchical data, what really ended up happening is that customers, would need to kind of go through a multi-step process to get their data in the right shape and set up so that they could actually create a useful global secondary index to look up their data in a hierarchical manner. So, what that ends up looking like is something like this. So, you'd have to go and basically determine the way that you wanted to, filter through your data. So in this particular case, you'd want to filter it by, year, month, and a given amount. And you'd have to, essentially, append another attribute as part of your table. And then you'd go ahead and create your GSI with that data. But, if you only realized an access pattern after, years of using a table, that table might have grown to be, 50, 100, 150 gigabytes in size. But essentially it would end up looking like this. So, at the end, you've got your partition key as a customer now, and your sort key as this kind of concatenated synthetic key that, will allow you to do this filtering. But it was a multi-step process. So to solve this, what we're launching is multi-attribute partition and sort keys. And, basically native support for this. So we have the same example here. So we have a partition key. It's going to be looking at customers. So we're looking to get, essentially with that partition key, you want to look up all the orders that customer might have. But there's a bunch of different ways you want to slice or filter that data. So, the orange box at the perimeter, you could basically look up, that entire item collection of that customer. So customer one. With the blue square, you're essentially filtering down to 2025, and we're querying left to right. So, you can basically query, all of the orders in 2025. And then if you wanted to filter it down further, you could go down to the month. So if you were just looking for October, and you could go even further and use an inequality and say, well, I only want things that are over $75. And, you don't need to do the multi-step process that I just walked through. You don't have to create synthetic keys. It's just natively supported. So essentially now, each partition key, for cardinality reasons, you can have up to four attributes to compose the partition key. That's the same for the sort keys for global secondary indexes. So this is really powerful when it comes to wanting to do hierarchical queries. And like I said, it's just a single step process. It dramatically simplifies your client-side code. You don't have to deal with padding, and it's just less verbose overall. And it actually reduces storage costs as well. So like that synthetic key, obviously, that's extra data that you got to store. You no longer need to store that data. So when you create a GSI, you could just specify which sort keys you want to use, and it doesn't need to be repeated essentially. So you'll be seeing this launch relatively soon. So just wrapping up, for DynamoDB at reInvent 2025, we have a handful of notable sessions. So the first one there, DAT 402, we got applied data modeling with Amazon DynamoDB. We've got a vibe data modeling session with Amazon DynamoDB. We have one about enhancing AI, agentic AI workflows. We got a recurring deep dive into Dynamo. We've got Samsung coming to talk a little bit about how they optimize one of their workloads. And then finally, we'll have a bit of a deep dive into resilience lessons from the October 2025 service disruption. So if you scan that QR code, you can get access to kind of the entire list of the things that we're going to be talking about there. But there'll be plenty of stuff. So if you're looking for a session, reach out to an account manager and potentially we could have meet directly. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Thank you.
All right, awesome stuff. Thank you, Mark. All right, I'm going to bring you in live. I'm also bringing in Alex just in case we need some color commentary or other expertise. Let's go live. Let's do it. Hey, welcome. Welcome, Mark.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Good stuff. I'm always curious when you watch your session back, or is there anything you wanted to add that maybe you didn't have enough time to add, or anything else that you really wanted to hone in on, the main message you wanted to get across?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think I probably could have gone a little bit deeper into each individual feature, but I think, Alex did a great job giving kind of the overall rundown of Dynamo kind of in general. So I think most of that was covered. And I was just eager to talk about kind of the recent stuff that we launched and kind of hone in on this new launch with the multi-attribute partition and sort keys that's kind of rolling out now. So depending on what region you work in, you might actually already see it.
Alex, would you think any of these releases really grab you like, oh, yes, finally, or I'd love to do this soon? And you're on mute, Alex.
Of course. Okay, there we go. Last year, the price decrease for on-demand and global tables, that was a huge one. A lot of those other things are great, but I'm super excited about this release. I didn't know it was coming out today, so it's awesome to be hearing it here. But like he's saying, managing those sort of synthetic keys, that really does limit your flexibility on changing your access patterns. We talked about that previously, and now the fact that I don't have to go recreate all these synthetic keys, backfill that for my whole table, I can just select those existing attributes on my table and say, hey, this part's the partition key, this part of the sort key, and do it. That's huge. I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people as their access patterns evolve. So yeah, I'm very excited about that one.
Awesome. All right, let's get to the first question. Do you plan to build a strong, consistent read on GSI?
It's a good question. I would say it's definitely something that customers have been asking for quite a while. I would say, in general, there's no specific timeline or anything like that, but it's something that we're actively investigating. So like I say, we've spoken to a number of customers. We understand, why there's a need for something like this. And it really comes down to a prioritization across our entire portfolio. So I talked a little bit about how we think about prioritizing different features within Dynamo. So whether it's kind of like our foundations or improving, the user experience and, or expanding use cases, I think that this one definitely stacks up there. But I would say, like, I don't have any specifics around, like, yes, formally this is coming, but I would expect that, at some point I wouldn't be too surprised. But there's nothing specific to share right now. But it is something that we know that many people want, and there's really good reasons for that. So yeah.
Excellent. All right, next question. How does the multi-attribute sort key impact the cost optimization we just discussed in the previous session? Is it number of attribute times the WCU?
So for the pricing for this one, like there is no incremental pricing. So, the way our pricing works today, it's going to work just the same for this. So like I say, like there's no incremental cost. It's essentially free to use the feature, but you're still charged for the same WCUs and RCUs when you're using the service. However, the core benefit of this one with the synthetic keys, as Alex was kind of talking about, is that, you don't have to duplicate your data. So in the example that I showed, that synthetic key was essentially kind of repeating a bunch of data that was existing in your table. And you no longer need to do that. So there could actually be some savings from a storage standpoint, which is of great benefit. But there's no specific pricing related to the multi-attribute partition or sort keys to take advantage of it. It's just, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. We had an interesting question in the chat. Well, I thought it was interesting. Someone was asking about, are there any DynamoDB MCP servers that helps with configuration and cost management, data modeling, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mentioned that in kind of the roadmap, and I would say this is like a strategic area of investment for Dynamo. We've been spending a lot of time kind of building this out. So within the last few months, I don't remember when our MCP server launched, 3 or 4 months ago now. Maybe someone can drop it in the chat. But basically, we did launch that. So for all API access, you're now able to access all of DynamoDB's APIs from that MCP server. In addition to the MCP server, just for API access, we have a number of different tools that's going to be coming out. So the first one and our most robust one right now is the data modeling tool. The goal really is to set it up so that you can use the AI agent of your choice and have them become kind of a DynamoDB expert. So you can give it data models that you've kind of determined yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're kind of that. You kind of have to define your own access patterns, kind of like what Alex was talking throughout his session. You're the query planner. So it's going to help you query plan these things and basically offer up, useful, high quality data models on the fly using your agent of choice. And, our expectation is that we're going to keep investing in our MCP server. So there's other tools already around if you're looking to do, for some of your workloads, if you need to shift them over from, a relational setup, you can bring them over using the database analyzer. It'll take a look at your access patterns and then kind of suggest which ones, maybe are ripe for coming on over. Our expectation is that we're going to keep expanding, the offering within the MCP tool pretty rapidly. I wouldn't say, our goal is that it's not going to follow, the same kind of cadence that some of our other releases require. I think we're going to try to go a little bit faster, in that area overall.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. Like I've played with it. It's really useful, and especially like good at asking the questions to help you like figure out what's going to matter in your application, things you might not be thinking about. So like I love it. Like a lot of great people on the team worked on that to encode a lot of that knowledge that's like in their heads or in the documentation, which like you can go through, but it's hard. But like this just helps you sort of figure it out a lot easier. So yeah, great tool.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. When should I use provision capacity or on-demand mode?
And maybe I can give my spiel, but Alex might have some stronger feelings about this. But I would say, like the perspective on kind of the product team is that, on-demand should really be the default for most workloads now. With the price cut that we did last year, that's essentially what we're trying to encourage. We think that it's the easiest product to use. It's the one that we like to pitch. However, depending on the workload, there are obviously still areas where it might make sense to use provision capacity. You can take advantage of reserved capacity as well. So I would say, if you have a workload that's bursty, or you're offering a lot of sales, or it has more variance overall, on-demand is going to be great. Like, it's just totally autopilot. I would say that for cyclical workloads where you have kind of consistent access patterns that vary throughout the day or month or year, provision mode is, still totally fine, but it comes with a little bit more management. So I would say, that's kind of how I think about it. I think that's kind of the general thing. I don't know, Alex, if you want to add anything there, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts, I'd say.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. Like, first of all, I always recommend, hey, use on-demand till it hurts. Like, if you're spending less than $100 or $1,000 on Dynamo per month, it's probably not worth any of your engineering time, like thinking about how much you should be provisioning and sort of all that stuff. It's like, wait till your DynamoDB bill is meaningful before you're like, okay, can I squeeze some better optimization out of this? The other thing I always say is, like, at the end of every month, you should, like, if you are using provisioned, you should figure out your utilization over the month. And if you're getting below, what is it? I think it's 28.8% now utilization after the price cut. If you're getting utilization less than that, you're overpaying for provision. Like, you'd get a better deal with on-demand, plus you get all that bursty benefits that Mark mentions there. So be looking at that. If you have a larger table and consistent access patterns throughout the month, like, provisioned with auto scaling can be great, and you can get pretty good utilization out of it there. So I would just say, like, make sure the juice is worth the squeeze in terms of, like, spending the time to optimize it and think about that stuff.
Great.
We also, I just want to go back. We had a question earlier about on demand, and someone saying, hey, are there any, like, performance penalties from that? Or is there anything like the Lambda cold start, where anything like that? And Mark, you can go into this too, but no, it essentially works the same, other than, hey, if you really burst up really high, there'll be a little bit of a period to scale that up. But that's, like, I can't remember what it is. It's like double your existing high point or something like that. I guess Mark, you want to expand on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a little bit more on that. Like, so I covered it as part of the roadmap or recent launches as well, but we launched warm throughput. And so before warm throughput, what you could do to scale your partitions was you'd increase the provision amount on a given table. And that would actually pre-split and pre-set up your partitions such that you could actually absorb much more traffic than what you're currently receiving. So you could basically set a new high watermark just by adjusting your provision throughput on a given table. Sophisticated customers were doing this pretty consistently when they knew, a large traffic amount was coming. They'd go in and pre-warm their table. We even had in our documentation, we called it pre-warming and stuff like this before we even launched the feature. But we decided to kind of make it a first-class feature, and we launched, a simple API where you can, basically do the pre-warming without having to go into provision mode, do the pre-warm and that sort of thing. So to kind of bring it all together, like, for on-demand mode, without pre-warming, there would be some scaling time as the demand increases. What I would suggest, though, is that, go and use the pre-warming API. If you know that, a New Year's Eve event is coming, or you have a sale for Black Friday, like, you're probably going to want to go and pre-warm your table so that you can instantly accommodate that throughput. So yeah, there is no scale time. There is no cold start. So long as you pre-warmed your table, you're basically good to go to accommodate whatever throughput you need.
I guess with Black Friday coming around, Cyber Monday, this is probably a good thing for people to pay attention to right now, hopefully. Is this something that people miss out on and they don't think about?
I think, like, it depends. Like, so what I would say is, like, most of our sophisticated customers that have used the service for some time, they're well aware of this. So I would say that, like, depending on your workload and depending on the size of bursts that you get, I would say most customers are generally aware of this. But I would say that, if you haven't heard of this before, definitely go and take a look. We encourage everyone to use this, particularly if you have, like, upcoming events. There's not really any good reason to not pre-warm the table.
And I will say, like, as an outside person from AWS, the thing I see on things like that is, like, if there used to be an old way to do it, like, like manually scale your table up to get that, and now there's, like, a new, better API driven way to do it. Sometimes it takes a while just for that knowledge to, like, trickle out, because people Google how to do this and they find an old article from 5 years ago about how to do this sort of stuff. So that's where I'd say, like, it can be hard to, like, get that message out, especially because it's not like a huge thing that's, like, getting trumpeted, all that stuff, but it is, like, a nice quality of life addition. Like, how do we get that out there to people to know about that?
Great. All right, next question. Any plans to change the billing method? We adjust the retention days, but it does not change the cost because it is billed by table size.
Yeah, so for configurable PITR, we didn't make a change to the pricing in that particular case. Like the focal point for that launch was adjusting the retention window specifically for compliance reasons. So I would say, for the most part, the pricing is going to stay the way it is for the time being. Like I said, the goal is really a compliance-oriented one for the handful of customers that needed shorter windows. It's something that we've looked at, though, in terms of how do we make this more cost-effective. We tend to do that across the entire service area. That's kind of why we did the on-demand and global tables price cuts last year. So it's something that we're definitely aware of. I would say there's nothing imminently on the horizon on that one, but it's something that we're aware of.
Right. Can you query on different sort keys in new GSI, or must use all sort keys in your query? Example, can you query SK1, SK3, or query must be hierarchical?
Yeah, in this particular case, it must be hierarchical. So the querying kind of goes from left to right. So you'll have to kind of include SK2 along the way, and this is just kind of the way that we store the data and how the system kind of works. But so it kind of has to be hierarchical. You have to kind of like progressively filter down and through. So it's just another thing. When it comes to query planning, like Alex said, there's still some amount to be done here. But this still just makes it quite a bit easier. Alex, I don't know if you want to add anything to this one, but
no, yeah, I just say, if you worked in relational databases with composite indexes, it's sort of the same rules there, right? Left to right, no skipping, and like until the first range or whatever. Like it is how I would think about it. So be sure you're thinking about how you're planning those keys and which order you're putting them on, which ones are you going to be doing exact match on. If you do have like range filters or something like that, where are you putting it so you can get the right benefits of that.
Excellent. With the new multi-attribute GSIs and DynamoDB, can different item types use different attribute names for the GSI keys, or must all items share the same key attribute names?
Can different items use different attributes?
I think I'm guessing what he's saying here is, imagine I have like sort of a single table where I have two different item types in the same table, and I want to sort of put them in the same item collection, but maybe I have different attribute names for each of those, for like the values I'm using to index them together. And so I'll try to answer. I think it has to be the same attribute names. Like you're basically going to specify it on a table and say, hey, here's the attribute names that I want to use for my global secondary index.
I'm not 100% sure on this one, actually. So I would say, I think each different attribute name has to be its own. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe we can follow up on the chat live. If it's there, we can kind of answer that question in chat. I have the product manager on that is launching this feature as well. So maybe if we can clarify the question a bit, he can kind of respond in the chat.
Sounds good. I guess in the chat, I just saw someone for the previous question about retention. They want to know if Eon can help with the longer retention for backups and cost-effective backups.
I can't speak for Eon. I imagine Mark can't either. But yeah, I think there's a lot of like configurability there on what they do. I think they do give you quite a bit of flexibility on that stuff. I know we got Ron on later. We got Leora on as well that can talk about this stuff. But yeah, they offer a ton of flexibility on. And then that's just what I would say is, hey, they're a very backup focused solution. They're going to offer like a sort of a broader range of features than you might see from some of the native AWS services, including Dynamo. So yeah, I think if you need more configurability with your backups, that'd be a good thing to look at.
Absolutely. Roger wants to know, are there any plans to change the audit method? The cost of using CloudTrail can be high in some cases since it's built by data events. Perhaps using CloudWatch logs like RDS would be cheaper.
Yeah, on this one, there's nothing that we're looking to do on on the CloudTrail front from a pricing standpoint right now.
Okay, it's a question. Loading up slow, hold on. How does the DynamoDB team make decisions on what features to build each year? Can people upvote, or is it just completely based on priority resources?
Yeah, so Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, so number one, we're constantly looking to understand what customers need, their pain points, that sort of thing. Like when we think about different features, we generally start with problems people are having. So we're not just here thinking up new things. We're really trying to hone in on, if you have a particular problem, we want to go and solve that. So, in terms of making decisions, I would say, the kind of core pillars, like I said, were the fundamentals, ease of use, and use case expansion. And I would say that the non-negotiables are obviously maintaining our performance, our availability, our resiliency, that sort of thing. So those things come first, and that's a lot of stuff that most folks don't really see. Obviously, like you just get to consume the service and it works, and you can kind of ignore all that. But a huge portion of our effort goes towards maintaining those fundamentals and keeping them best in class. So that's kind of first and foremost. And then when it comes to expanding and launching different features, essentially, we look at product feature requests. So depending on the size of your company and what kind of enterprise support you have, if you have account managers and that sort of thing, there is a way to upvote our features. So you can always have them do that sort of do that, and the product team gets together every month or so, and we curate this list and that sort of thing. So all of those feature requests are seen. But I would say, during events like these, if there are things you care a lot about, drop them in the chat. Reach out to different product managers. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. We're always trying to listen and understand the different pain points, and we organize our roadmap to solve the strongest pain point at a given time. So that's kind of what I would say on that. Is like that's how we structure, and that's kind of our mental model for how we decide what to build over time.
All right. Mark, I think you might have a hard stop, so we probably have time for one last question. They want to know, could you advise on scenarios where DynamoDB might not be the best choice? We have a write-heavy use case, and our reads require aggregation, sorting, and filtering on multiple fields.
Maybe Alex, do you think you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I would say again, like that complex filtering use case, that aggregation use case, anything where you might need to be like reading through a fair bit of data. You just need to think of like for that sort of use case, hey, if I'm doing sorting and filtering, how big is like the target result set that I'll be hitting, and how much am I going to have to be sort of filtering out? Does it fit well with sort of any indexes that I can set up? Or are there, if you really have like 10 different attributes you want to let users filtered on, you want to let them sort in different orders, and it might be over a gigabyte of data for that given customer, just that they'll sort of be filtering and sorting on. That's a tough one with Dynamo. It's just like, how many indexes do I have to set up to sort of manage all this flexibility? It's going to be a tough one for a lot of databases, but like, yeah, for Dynamo, that's going to be tricky. So I would say if you have a lot of that, like really complex filtering logic that you can't sort of narrow down the target set before you do maybe some client-side filtering, that can be a tough use case for Dynamo. Yeah, that's one of the bigger ones, I'd say. You got any others, Mark, or anything?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I mean, I would say the other thing that I would say is this is a prime example of like a problem type that we love to hear about. So aggregates is something that we're passively looking at and contemplating what that might look like. And I'm definitely not committing to say like, hey, we're going to launch something like that on Dynamo. But this is a pretty good case of like, we'd love to hear more actually about the specific workload where you have to do all of this complex aggregation. And if we were to launch like a fully managed feature on that, like what might that look like? So it's a really good example of like, hey, I have this type of problem. This is how we kind of orient our roadmap. So if you have more feedback, or if you want to get in touch and talk about this specifically kind of offline, we'd be happy to hear about that specific workload.
And I would say like, Mark talked about this. They have Zero-ETL to OpenSearch now, and OpenSearch can handle a lot of those like complex filtering, sorting use cases there. I used to love to recommend like Rockset for this too. They were a great one, although they've now been acquired by OpenAI. But like, but the one thing I'd say is like, how core is that sort of aspect to your application? Is that like a large majority of your application is going to be complex filtering, sorting, and all that sort of stuff? Or is it a smaller piece to where, hey, you can be copying this data to OpenSearch and powering it with that, but you still get all the benefits of Dynamo for like the core of your application? That's going to be more sort of straightforward access patterns.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, Mark, for joining us. Like I said, I think you have a hard stop, but Alex, we have a few more questions to go over, but thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much,
Talk
Joe.
to you later.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Alex. Cheers, guys.
All right, Alex. So like I said, we have a few more questions. We have a few more time, a little bit more time for the next session. So I thought maybe we go over and try to get through this session queue or the question queue if you have time.
Let's do it.
All right. First one, once again, like I said,
we just did that one.
Yeah. I'll give it a second to reflect here. Hold on, let's go here until it goes. All right, here it is. All right. So how can we migrate the existing concatenation sort key to a multi-attribute sort key?
Yep, great question. So you will. I hope I'm not. I wish Mark were here. Like, definitely correct me. I know Kevin's in the chat, so maybe he can correct me if I'm wrong. But you will need to create a new index if you want to take advantage of this one. So like for all indexes going forward, I think this should be your pattern rather than like creating those sort of concatenated synthetic fields that Mark was talking about. Hey, you should be using this. If you already have an existing GSI that's using that synthetic concatenated field and it's working for you, I think you can probably just keep it and that's what it is. If you do want to change it, what you do is you create a new GSI and then specify those sort of like core attributes rather than like jamming them together as a synthetic field. You just specify the attributes individually. Dynamo is going to backfill that for you, and then you can switch that over to that new access pattern if you need to. You'll need to change your query a little bit because rather than having like this sort of concatenated string, you'll just be specifying multiple values in your key condition expression for that. So that's how it could work, and then you could drop your old index if you wanted to. I would say, it depends on the specifics, but if you have an existing one that's working, I probably wouldn't migrate to this because the existing one's working, you're gonna be paying for that backfill. But I think everything going forward, hey, avoid those synthetic keys and just use this feature where you can specify those attributes directly.
All right, this is part 2 of that question you had earlier. I want to know, we are considering using a different database for front-end queries while continuing to use DynamoDB for writes as it performs exceptionally well in this role. What would be your recommendations?
Yeah, it's a good question, and sort of kind of what I was going back to with OpenSearch a second ago of just like how much of, how much of your front end queries are you serving by this other database? If it's almost all of them, then I'd say, hey, why are you using Dynamo for that? Are you getting some benefit from Dynamo to that? If not, then I worry about, hey, you're writing to Dynamo. You also have to like replicate it out to that other database. Now there's some latency for your front end queries to even see those out there. So like make sure you're getting some benefit of that. Excuse me. But I do see people that, hey, they write to Dynamo, they do a lot of stuff in a lot of queries from Dynamo that are serving their end users, but they also have that additional piece that's serving those like more flexible access patterns that they need, complex filtering, stuff like that, in an OpenSearch, in a ClickHouse or something like that. And I think that's fine. But if you're doing most of your sort of read queries from a different database, I don't know that Dynamo is adding a ton to you there.
All right, excellent. Okay, we probably have time for one more question. Let me bring this up. I'm not sure. See if there's like a lightning one you can see it or answer right now. Any of these grab you right off the bat that you can answer in a few minutes or so? I think some of them for Mark.
The first one, I would just say, what work around particle are they doing? So just for people that aren't familiar, like Dynamo does support this particle API where you can write your queries in like a more SQL-like syntax rather than sort of the Dynamo specific APIs around get item, put item, query operation, and things like that. So you can use that. The big things I say around, I'm not a huge particle fan, to be honest. And the big thing for me is like, I think it hides what's happening under the hood with Dynamo. And if you want to be effective with Dynamo, you absolutely need to know like those couple things of what's happening under the hood. You need to understand how Dynamo partitions your data, how it's using the partition key to split those data and assign them different places, and then using the API to access that efficiently. And I think some of that is hidden for you if you're giving that particle query language. Now you're back into, hey, I'm not the query planner anymore, even though you like sort of are, right? There's not enough of a query planner behind particle to like change it. It's just converting that into those operations. So I would generally say avoid that, other than I think there are a few things you can do in particle that you can't do with like the basic Dynamo operations. So that's like kind of interesting. I always had one person at DynamoDB that defended it on that ground, but I I can't speak for them and like how much they're investing on that or adding a bunch more features there.
Thank you for hanging around. I know you're going to still be in the background, so we'll probably see more of you later. Thank you so much for joining us again. Really appreciate it.